Hey there, neighbors. Welcome back to the channel. This is Anarchy in the 603, and you are back for another postcard from your friendly neighborhood anarchist. Absolutely nobody's favorite, D-tier production quality, lightly edited, off-dome, spontaneous dispatch from wherever I happen to be right now to wherever you are at the moment. And as usual, I happen to be sitting in my backyard having a bit of coffee from Cumbies. If you reuse a cup, it's only like $1.83 for a giant thing like this. And doing some more knitting. Finished the ridiculously long hat from the other day, and now I'm on to another one. Anyway, so to the point of today's subject, I was just watching a Caroline Easom video. She is wicked funny, by the way, you guys. And so this isn't my usual subject matter. I mean, then again, what really is my usual subject matter, but whatever is on my mind right now. But this one's gonna go into talking about, of all things, a romantasy trope. Now, you might have heard, if you have a woman in your life these days, or someone femme-presenting, you've probably heard the term romantasy, and if you haven't heard the term, it's one of those bodice ripper books where usually they're humping a werewolf or something, alright? The genre's gotten wicked popular ever since the pandemic, and TikTok took off with the specific genre within TikTok known as Booktok being a big driver of these publications. And me, honestly, I've been a fantasy and sci-fi reader since I was a kid. Like, dragon humping, werewolf diddling, vampire hoodly doodling, all that stuff. Come on, it's being a thing. We're just being more overt about it now and, crossing the streams or whatever, and I'm cool with it. I mean, I remember one book, a series by Mercedes Lackey, following different bards around this one fictional world, and their stories would overlap. And this one bard fell in love with and managed to incite a relationship with a humanoid griffin-like creature. I mean, like, humanoid eagle thing. No lion parts or nothing, so it wasn't really, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know what you know about birds, but they got a cloaca, otherwise known as essentially a pussy dick butt, because it's all just kind of a mishmash down there. Most birds kind of mate by just sort of mushing their cloaca together and hoping for the best. So, I mean, unless you're a duck and then you got a corkscrew. But anyway, this was not a duck. So yeah, the romantasy trope, nothing new. So if you've got a woman in your life, you've likely seen one of these books lying around. And while I'm absolutely cool with the genre, one thing that has always bothered me is over reliance on tropes in writing. And one of the big tropes that I see in strong female characters a lot of the time is, for some reason, authors of all genres seem to like to put strong female characters through trauma. And I'm talking like long-term violations of like the most horrible kind, like either from a family member or being held captive, and horrible things are done to her over the course of, I mean, it's not just like once, but it's, this is something happening on the regular. And, as a survivor of long-term trauma of all the most violating kinds, all of which happened before my brain was fully done developing, the fact that this trope gets used at all irritates me. But what really, really freaking grinds my gears about it is the fact that, like, every time, right, the strong female character goes through things that would absolutely get this video yanked by the YouTube content censors and, like, probably risk my channel getting booted or demonetized or something if I actually were earning any money from this, which I'm absolutely not. But yeah, I've got to talk about the stuff that these women go through in these books in the most oblique of terms. And yet, the worst that she gets out of it is like nightmares that the male protagonist slash love interest gets to, oops, sorry, I'm trying to tug my yarn here. And yeah, D-tier production quality, kids. The worst of the results of this trauma is like, you know, she has night terrors that male protagonist gets to hold her through and soothe her through, or she might have a panic attack or something. And like, y'all, that ain't it. The fact is, people like me, you don't see a lot of folks like me around who survived and thrived and broke cycles and whatever, partially because a lot of us don't survive this long without falling into some really dark places that they may not get out of. Many of us who do survive don't get to talk about it to anybody. And I want to talk about that a little bit today. So, before we go any further, I should probably start off with a bit of a, I guess, a content warning. The rest of this video is going to be very frank. I'm not going to refer to, like, anything in specific. I'm not going to get into gory details. But going forward, when I say people like myself, consider me talking about people who survived the most extreme of violations that you can do to a child, starting at the age of 3. And the worst of things concluding when I was about 12, and then until I was 18 or so, a lot of brutality still, but none of the further violations by any other parties. Instead, I was getting savagely brutalized by one of my own parents instead, and blamed for everything that was done to me, and also using those things that were done to me that I survived as a justification for the brutalization that I was receiving. And then not really fully disentangling from the psychological abuse until I was much older, actually 40, when I finally went completely no contact with that branch of my family. A lot of people like me, we don't make it, you guys. The increase in self-harm and suicidality and ideation, which often leads to completion, the higher risk of falling into abusive romantic partnerships in adulthood, many of which often turn deadly for the woman involved. The increased risk of falling prey to trafficking, frequently through a intimate partner dynamic where a gal finally starts getting, treated with love and stuff, and it turns out that the guy was love bombing her because he saw her as someone who was vulnerable and didn't have family to watch out for them, and already clearly had traumas and issues, and love bombed, and next thing you know is tricking her out to his friends and associates and stuff. That happens. It didn't happen to me, but it happens. It happens a lot. The increase in addiction because people try to self-medicate for this trauma. The increase in, how many of these women have who have survived this kind of trauma die before they get to my age because of an abusive domestic partnership, because of falling into trafficking and becoming another disposable human, by falling into addiction and overdosing. That's, first off, some of the three big things that'll stop us from getting to where I am. And then, for those of us who do, like, I was able to knuckle down and not think about. I would think about it, obviously, like, how do you forget? But I would intellectualize it. Like, it's over, whatever, I got over it, I've got a family, I've got a community, I've got a life. The worst of everything that's ever happened to me is long past. And clearly I'm fine. Clearly I'm fine. There I am with the damn yarn again. I've really got to move that. Hold on a second, you guys. One of these days I'm actually going to show you guys the jankiness of my setup and my equipment. Today is not that day. Yeah. So those are three things that can prevent somebody from surviving as long as I have. And then for those of us who do survive, who, like, intellectualized away everything, because I got married young and we had our son young, and I didn't have time to think about the impact of what happened to me or what was done to me and all of that. I didn't have time because I had a son to raise. Damn it, I had a son to raise, a job to work, a life to live. And it wasn't until my son was finishing high school and COVID happened, and I had work from home and so many hours in the day to just sit with myself. And I mean with myself, because as an immunocompromised individual, I pretty much couldn't leave the house or even my basement for 4 years, guys. Aside from necessary doctor's appointments, like, you did not see me leave this property for damn near 4 years until I finally got, like, fully vaccinated enough to be out in the world again. And even now, I'm still cautious. Like, there's tuberculosis and shit out there now. But anyway, I digress. It wasn't until after I'd sat with myself for all that time that my body was finally able to process the fact that it had been safe enough, long enough, that I finally had permission to feel everything. And I've been recovering from that since. I'm lucky in that I taught myself Taoist philosophy, dialectical behavioral therapy, friggin' biopsychology, basic psychology, operant conditioning, like, the shit that I have studied over the years to try to make sense of myself, my life, how to move forward, all of these tools that I had intellectualized and I had used as like a clumsy wielded scalpel in order to excise what I had to keep moving forward, regardless of the fact that, the loss of muscle tissue and the loss of limb was causing me to limp and causing me to crawl forward with just whatever I had left. It didn't matter. At least I was doing it, and I taught myself, and thank God I did, because when I finally broke and I finally tried again for a therapist, because the first time most therapists don't want to deal with people like me. Most therapists aren't educated enough to have the expertise to handle people like me. Most of the time, people like me get labeled borderline personality disorder, complex PTSD, regular PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, mania, all these things, right? And then we get medicated, and then we get discarded. Or we get rudimentary therapy with people who are not trained in the deep trauma and recovery from it. Like, when I finally snapped, when I finally went and reached out again to try to find a therapist, because my first therapy sessions that I tried back in my 20s were with one of these people who was like, I don't want to handle this shit, who literally rolled her eyes at me when I was in my first session, so I never went back again. When I tried again to find a therapist all these years later, Mind you, this is after the mental health revolution and self-help revolutions that we've been having. And, like, therapy has become like a multi-billion-dollar industry since the time. In the years, the 20-something years since my last attempts. Even then, I was turned away by 5 private practitioners, 3 group practices, and 2 local area agencies because nobody had the expertise and training or wherewithal to even try to take on the kind of complex mental health landscape that I have because of what I have survived. When I was finally so lucky to get my therapist, my temporary doctor through my EAP was able to find her. He knew about her and her history, where she had started out her career with the homicide division of the PD at our state capitol, interviewing and helping treat and counsel the families of homicide victims, where she was used to going to crime scenes and stuff, and then I went on to work for a rape crisis center, the largest in the area, before going into private practice. Like, he knew that she alone would be able, of all people in this area, to help me, and she took me on. And in the last 4 years, she has, aside from what insurance has paid her, she has not seen a single copay from me. That is how poor I have been during my 4-year disability fight. And thank the universe for her all the time. I really am thankful, because I wouldn't be where I am right now, as messy as I am, without her. And she's inspired me to do more healing, to do more growth in the last 4 years than I ever thought I possibly could. And I can for the first time say in my life that I genuinely love who I am now. When a few years ago I could say, I try my best to be a good person, and I really like myself. I like what I've done. I like what I've been able to accomplish, and I'm proud of my accomplishments. But I never could say that I loved myself. And now I can, and that means so much. But yeah, so most of the time you don't see people like me because though there are more of us than you'd like to think about. Most of us don't make it this far. Those of us that do often spend a lot of time in hospital, or they wish they could, but can't afford it. And a lot of us, even if we have a strong community around us, you still don't know. Because who talks about it, man? Nobody wants to even think about it outside of their average prurient interest that they get through true crime. And don't get me wrong, don't get it twisted. I'm a true crime girly. Like, I listen to Morbid, I listen to Affirmative Murder, I listen to Crime Junkie, I tune into a couple of different true crime channels. I do. But, like, aside from hearing about those details in the form of our consumption by entertainment, how many of y'all have actually sat down and talked with a survivor? How many of y'all have talked to a survivor, and when they got to a point where it got too icky for you, you didn't back out and you kept listening? I know that many of you might like to think that you would. But I hate to tell you from personal experience that far too many don't. I identify a lot with Heath Ledger's Joker, where his story is always changing about how he got his scars. Partially, he's making up a story on the fly. Partially, it's, to serve whatever point he's trying to make at the time, as he's planning on burning down the world or whatever, right? It's all part of the bit. But ultimately, I think one thing that both the Joker and I know is that we can tell a different story every time if we want to. We can tell the truth every time if we want to as well. It's still going to be every bit as incredulous sounding, it's still going to be every bit as unbelievable, or it's still going to be every bit as quasi-believable, but you don't want to really believe it. It's still going to be every bit as uncomfortable. It doesn't matter what the story is. You're not going to want to look at it anyway. And you're going to do your best not to listen. So I can tell you whatever story it is. I can tell you the truth every time, and that is what I do when people do talk about it or do ask me about it. I tell the truth. But very few people really want to know how I got these metaphorical or sometimes literal scars. People a lot of the times think they want something until they get it. That's the reason why there's safe words in the BDSM world, kids. Because you should always have a chance to nope out. People looking for trauma porn ask you time and time again how you got them scars, and then they're like, oh nope, safe word, back out. How easy do you think it would be to start feeling like that other person's shame, the perpetrator's shame, is your shame because ain't nobody gonna listen to you? How easy is it to feel like what you bore, it is so shameful that you have to bear it in silence forever because nobody dares to look at it? You think it's uncomfortable to hear how I got this way? You think it's uncomfortable to look at a person who's like this? Especially when I'm at my worst, especially when I'm at my most manic or most dissociated or most raw and bleeding and vulnerable. Think that's hard to look at? How hard do you think it was to live through? How hard do you think it is to live with? How hard do you think it is to move forward and break generations worth of cycles? This end result you see here is the end result of two different family lines of generational trauma and hardship that for some of us went all the way back 600 or more years. You don't break that stuff overnight, and you don't get to where they got overnight either. And I'm lucky to say that I was able to break the cycle enough that my grandson, surprised though he was when my own son was so young, and blessing that he is 6 years later, and has been since the moment he was discovered to be to be happening. That child is nothing but a gift. But that child is also growing up fully supported, loved, confident, like cherished, and unscarred by everything that I went through. He never needs to know. All he knows is that his parents and his grandparents love him, and that his community loves him, his family loves him, and that he is limitless. Anything he wants to achieve, if he puts his mind and his efforts to it and has his community around him, if he so chooses to strive, he might just get there, or even further than he could possibly have dreamed of. I'm lucky. But a lot of people will never know how lucky I am because they refuse to look at how far I had to go to get here and the leagues that were traveled in the making of me. And back to the point of this kind of trauma being a convenient storytelling trope. I don't know about you, but that story of overcoming generational trauma, of overcoming personal trauma, and still being fucking broken but resilient, and striving and trying and able to still forge forward and make a life regardless, and have a son and a grandson who are living proof that cycles can be broken. Like, I think that's a much more compelling story than Here, honey, let me soothe your night terrors. Press your face against my warm, either completely smooth or completely furry chest, depending on what tickles your skirt. Like, I don't know, but then I'm just an old bag in my backyard talking, right? Who even listens to me anyway? It is reductionist, dismissive, and in fact downright insulting to use long-term trauma that is perpetrated against a young body and mind that is still in the course of learning what it is to be human. And to reduce that to just a storytelling trope that can be soothed away by masculine potency and strength. Motherfucker, I tell you what. The huevos that I have had to hold within me in order to get where I am right now and to look into the lens of that camera and speak unblinkingly like this, you couldn't afford these eggs, motherfucker. None of you could. Anyway. This is where manic pixie dream girls go to die. And this has been Anarchy in the 603. Have a beautiful day, my neighbors. I'm gonna sit here. I'm gonna knit. And for now, I'm out.